Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, greetings and salutations. Somewhere in that order is a side helping of welcome to the safe room featuring security side quest. My name is Tristan Watty, and I am joined by the marvelous Mr. Mystery himself, Russ. How's it going?
Hey, how you doing, Tristan?
I am doing mighty fine, peachy keen, and a little bit cold with all the snow in the Northeast. So,
Tell
yeah,
me about it.
yeah, right. It's like it's definitely a little bit more than hoodie weather this week, but
Yep, it's winter, all right.
yeah, it came in. And speaking of coming in, Jose, thank you for joining in, and Ari, thank you. Greetings to you as well. But for those who are joining for the first time, let us hit the rewind button and say where we're coming in from. So if we rewind, we do this, we go backwards, right? So Russ gets it. My name is Tristan Watty. I'm joining from the Professional Services Division of AWS as a senior security consultant, where we help to accelerate customers' journey to the cloud in a secure manner, fashion, way, and form. And I am joined by himself, who is.
I'm Russ. I'm from the Customer Incident Response Team. I help all of you, well, hopefully not all of you, but some of you contain and mitigate security incident response. So
That is a good question to ask. It's like, do I help all of you or do I not help all of you? Right?
I like to think that we help everyone. Sometimes a lot of the incidents, if we see there's a lot going on, we'll throw that out, to the community. So, some of that threat intel is good and actionable. So
helping the world, right? As our producer Jeff is there joining in, thank you, as well as Eric. Yeah, I think it's a little bit of mix, right? It doesn't have to be incidents. It could be holiday recipes. Russ is good with that as well, right? So, speaking of holiday recipes, I want to know where everybody's joining in from because we want you to drop your favorite holiday recipe in the chat. And also let us know where you're coming in from. It's a win-win situation. One, for our audience, capture and chat, and two, for us to copy and try and recreate during the holidays. Right?
Exactly.
That's the win-win part of it. But if you want a little bit more of something to chew on, right? You see what I did there? Answer this question, Russ. Would you rather have unlimited mana but low-level spells, or limited mana but access to legendary gear?
I'm probably gonna go with unlimited mana. I think I would be the type that would just be like, fireball. Guess what? Another fireball. So yeah, I think that's
just
what I would
over and over.
I think it depends, like on what the legendary gear is, but just off the top of my head, I would probably go unlimited mana. I'm just gonna spam fireball.
You just need that one spell.
Everything fireball. Burns.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. When I was looking at it, I was like, okay, would you rather have the unlimited mana? I think, yeah, I would do the unlimited mana just because the same thing. I would just spam random low-level spells. It's like, oh, you're walking down the street. Here's an ice spell for you, right? That kind of thing. I'd be that trickster, right?
Yeah, I was about to say, just like being a demon troll.
Yeah, exactly.
Congratulations. Like, you now have frozen pants. Good luck.
Blow out your birthday candles. Oh, surprise, it's frogs inside. So, speaking of frogs inside, this is our fun episode and recap of how we go off the rails a lot, but also stay on the rails when it comes to the guard variety of rails, right? This is 2025. When we think of the safe room featuring security side quests, we went on a ton of journeys, a ton of quests that we liked and liked even more, right? Dramatic pause because this is dramatic season, right? So before we jump into it, in our recap, our Russ, where did we come from last week?
Yes. Last week we had our special guests. So we had a new secret appeared. Git Guardian. Wow, I did that last time too. Git Guardian joins the chat. their name, I guess, is very difficult for me to say. Where we went over some things related to secrets management. So that was a really good episode. I enjoyed that one. You can always go find our previous episodes on our YouTube page. And yeah, I've been going back a little bit. So go check out the YouTube page. Look at some of all the things that we're going to talk about today. But today is our recap episode. We've titled it, Would You Like to Load Your Save File 2025 Quest Rush Recap?
Yes.
And really adding those tongue twisters in there to mess with me now.
I'm just going to keep adding on to it now. Yeah. It's just going to be a bunch of G's in the row, right? Oh, so, yeah, GG. But speaking of GGs, let us speak about 2025 holistically, right? What we wanted to do is, one, bring awareness to all the episodes that we have. So go visit the YouTubes in order to revisit some of your favorite side quests, favorite adventures, favorite guests, favorite safe room episodes of past, right? Because, spoiler alert, we are not going to be back until next year, which is 2 weeks from now. So we're going to enjoy the holidays. And how do we do so? Well, we'll look over our own episodes to see what we bring. Yeah, see? Russ got it. But where we wanted to go today is kind of talking about some of the areas, right, that we kind of had achievement unlocks pop up on the screen, right? So what were some major security competencies that we went over within our cloud security journey? So to recap shortly, DevSecOps pipelines, zero trust architectures, WAF, data prevention, and the list keeps going on and on. So we'll save that, right? A little bit of spoilers there. But I think the main part we want to get across is how we leveled up from a level 1 adventurer all the way up to, I would say, 99 or 9,000, if you get that reference, 10 billion points to you. When you think of your security skill tree progression, what did you kind of pick up along the way? Always feel free to drop the random comments in chat to say, hey, I learned this one item. And that's what we aim for, just one thing. And if it's not one thing, it's two. So where do we go from that? Well, we go to the community highlights. Some of the things that we got messages on, what we heard from people who we had conversations with on, hey, we watched your show and we picked up this, right? So stay tuned in for that. And lastly, kind of the sneak preview. I'll say it's the season pass, right, into next year and kind of what we're thinking about and how you can contribute to the next season as well. But before we do that, we always like to leave on a cliffhanger. But in this case, we leave on a question. So, as always, feel free to put 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the chat if you fought a security boss battle this year. And especially if you had one that gave you a lot of trouble. Right? So feel free to look at, was it WAF rules, DLP, compliance, DevSecOps pipelines? But Russ, what was your own personal boss battle from a security ride that you had to kind of go through this year?
Yeah, I'm actually going to say DevSecOps pipeline. With having released a service this year, I'm going to go with that as my own personal security boss battle. It was really cool to have, experienced that, especially, here with AWS, being a part of releasing a service and seeing all that goes into it, and all the challenges that come with it. So I'm going to go with DevSecOps personally.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing, right? So it helps you to level up, right? Those experience points. So what somebody also said is creating an incident response plan, right? That's a good one. I think we should talk about that somewhere at the end. We also have Bevan talking about number 1. So it seems like DevSecOps pipeline configuration, that is one of the major items. And I would also add that to my list this year from the creation standpoint of the DevSecOps pipeline, making sure the proper tooling is in place and scanning mechanisms and making sure that PRs, they're a very important part of the process. And you should have, let's say, some reviewers that are of the security variety, right? So we also have a question. Is natting a security feature? So that's interesting. That's more, I would say, leaning towards the networking side of the house, right? Just from a definition standpoint. But it's also you're taking one address and adding it to another address. One, because IP address schemes where you want to have it exposed to the outside world, you need to take all your internal addresses and add it into one publicly facing address, right? So good networking conversations. And you could do and use some security trickery there as well. So thank you for the questions. But
I do love that basically every topic can be talked about, because you could be like, that's doing network, but how do we do networking securely at scale?
Yes.
That's a conversation right there.
Yeah, exactly, right? And that's why I like side quests, because they could go down all those little nuances, those little, tidbits, those little coffee talks. You're going to have a lot of holiday parties. Hey,
there you go.
Bring up some networking security. Right? Yeah.
So, Uncle Bob, how are you securing your workloads this year?
Yeah, right? And the funny thing is, you can say, hey, if you don't know, we spoke about maybe 12 major security competencies within our show this year, right? And one of them was around DevSecOps mastery, right? Of figuring out, hey, how do you embed security into your development pipeline? This is a conversation we had a couple of times in random episodes throughout the season. And I think part of it was just learning the mindset of shifting left, right? How do you go from me click on this within console to, hey, this is what we want to do holistically. This is how I want this person to do this. This is how this person has access, right? Just learning how to implement the correct security guardrails and tooling in order to make sure that each stage of your CI/CD pipeline, and I say each stage because there are multiple stages where security is implemented, but should be thought of from the beginning all the way to the end, right? You want to build those robust items into it. Bake security in. Right?
That's a good point, though. You say that, but a lot of people believe that baking security in from the beginning means you have to do all of the security all at the front. You don't have to do that. As long as you're considering and writing, or not writing, but drafting that plan for security through each step. Yeah, you don't have to do it all right at day one, So yeah, that's a good point to, yeah.
And it's funny because there's automation parts, right? Because one of the conversations we were having, and we always go off the rails here. So today is not going to be different, is automated scanning orchestration, all right? What security gates are you automating and which ones have human gate checks, all right? This is where I was kind of emphasizing the wink, wink, nudge, nudge of having reviewers, because you can add, certain reviewers into your CI/CD pipeline in order to be, hey, maybe this is an AI agent that is doing this particular action to say, hey, maybe you want to rethink this before you push this into a branch or production, right? Hopefully there's a couple of steps before it goes into production, but you can have different items and there are different mechanisms to do so. So what you want to consider is, where does the human start and then where does the automation begin, and vice versa, right? So Russ, when you were going through your DevSecOps journey, I would say, what was your approach to this?
Yeah, so that's a tough one, right? Because as we were going, we are keeping scale in mind so much in basically everything we do. And I feel like a lot of people watching could probably, relate to that sort of thing. But really, that's the thing that kind of, I took away from it this year was not just, building or setting up these pipelines or, ensuring that, human versus automation, although it is extremely important. But it's also, how do you, implement those systems at scale because the human side of things is so limited. And so realistically, that's what I focused on this year, was just trying to get rid of as much of the necessary items and really allowing me to free up my time on things that are important and need to have human eyes on there. So, like 2 weeks ago, we went over the Security Incident Response Services new agentic investigative tooling. And so just using that for an example, trying to create those sorts of workflows. That way, you get an automatic, as soon as you open up a case, 10 minutes later, once the agentic system is, done the queries and analyzed what it needs to analyze and comes back with a summary, you have your basic initial triage, and then you can really move towards more of the necessary manual labor. And then, doing things like, I know we spoke a lot about automation this year, especially IR automation, but being able to have those initial systems that respond without getting humans involved, is good from like a security standpoint. So that way you can go back and check things later, but it's quick. That's when I look at AI, which we'll get into a bit later. But when we're talking about, say, for example, the most recent AI attacks, that Anthropic was talking about, whatever, they're really nothing that AI is doing is novel, right? It's all the same things that we've already seen, just done quicker, and or being able to be a little bit flexible enough to be able to pivot quickly. And so realistically, that's kind of our solution to that problem, is just automating. So that way these steps are being taken quicker through these automated processes rather than human processes. Doesn't give AI enough time to really propagate and get a good foothold into the system and be able to pivot if you're already, isolating and quarantining these resources before AI, has a chance. So yeah, a little bit of a side tangent, but for me, that's what I was, as far as when to put human and when to automate. For me, it's like I need to get the human point involved as little as is necessary. And especially as more of like a, when possible, more of like a review of what the automation has already done. Ideally, especially because I'm thinking from such an IR perspective. So yeah, that's what I've kind of pulled from my DevSecOps journey.
Yeah, and it's all great points. And one of the key things I think you nailed is the fundamental items, the fundamental guardrails, the things that you put into your system isn't changing that much, right? It's just extra considerations that you have to put into place, right? You still need security scanners, you still need SCP policies, you still need all these items that you think about when you think of like, hey, am I well architected, right? It's still something that should be top of mind is, do I have these pieces? And then you can start to identify within your target state security strategy if you have any gaps, right? It's like, wait, we have this. Maybe we should create some custom security controls that we can integrate within our environment to help, one, scale to your point, but two, make sure that we're prepared for whatever comes next, right? For the threats that come after, which was the name of one of our episodes, might drop a couple another, right? So those are the things that you start to think about, right? Especially when you think about it from an advanced scanning mechanism, procedure, way, form. The other item is when you tailor that to something like data loss prevention, right? How do you harness, the AWS native services with some of the AI components, right? People's mind often goes to Macy, right? It's like, okay, it has DLP capabilities where you can say, hey, there's sensitive data in this bucket, this bucket, this bucket, this bucket, but Macy has the automated discovery feature where it can kind of correlate, right, and give you a little bit of a better idea where your sensitive data is, so that you're not scanning the same thing over and over in a sense, right? So we went over some of those fundamentals. We went over some implementation patterns and ways to kind of go through and customize it to your environment, because you can have custom identifiers that you say, hey, I know this looks like a credit card pattern in my environment, but this is actually how we handle recipes or something along those lines, right? It's these little things and tweaks that you have to think of, because as you think about the automated, let's say, here's an alert and here's a response kind of workflow, these are the things that help you to reduce some of the noise that's coming into your environment, right? Is customizing it. You have the strong foundation, you put up the different guardrails, now you customize and tweak, right? Because what is the fear of everybody's like, oh, we get too many alerts, and then some alert passes by, and then you have to talk to Russ, and then Russ says, oh, hi. Right? And that's where that interaction kind of stops, and then Russ gets into figuring things out, right? So
yeah,
I want to say is, when you think of defense in depth, if we recap our episodes from this year, what do you think are some of the major points that should pop into somebody's head when they think of defense in depth?
I think in general, looking back at a lot of the episodes we've done, hopefully you see that in your own, just looking at, the different ways that we have added, basically service and security principle, and tried to marry those, and seeing, how we integrate them as much as possible, that you see that there is a lot of, steps and doors that we introduce every time, there's something new. And so, just keeping that in mind, I think back about how we've used the castle simile so often, because that really is defense in depth, right? You have your moat and your perimeter security and the guards on top of the, crenellations and stuff like that, and having, your critical information as like your throne room or the treasury or whatever. And I really think of that in as far as defense in depth. And hopefully, that's the mentality that people take from this, is that, you don't have to be perfect at every step. That's why we build the defense in depth, is so that way, if you miss, someone who's swimming through the moat, in alligator infested moat, that the big doors will prevent them from getting access. Or if they, climb up a wall, a guard will see them, or something. Like having those multiple steps in the process to be able to detect and keep things secure. So that way there's no single point of failure. You don't miss one thing and you're like, game over,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I take out of that, and hopefully that, everyone else, you all take from it too, is there's no single point of failure, and we do that so that way each step has a place where you can be visible and enact a security control.
Yeah, and it's funny because as I think of an analogy, I think part of what we discovered throughout the years, the analogy, some of the places of focus for security also kind of shifted a little bit, right? Where if you were to zoom in a bit, you start to think about how, you have your, let's say, your crown jewels, right? Mm-hmm. Your crown jewels is what? Is it the secret recipe, or is it the data that you acquired while trying to come up with the secret recipe, right? So if you think about the castle, you have the one room that has all the guards, it has the doors, it has everything. There's the crown jewels is in it, is the one ring in there, right? But then you have the library, and the library has all the data about the kingdom, right? It has all these different books and all these items where you might allow people to go in a little bit more freely, right? To read. It's like, oh, you can go read our books, right? But now the focus is on, why do you want to read my books, and what can you read within that library? It's not so much as right? Just here, you have access in, right? So what we're talking about is how you're processing data and how data exfiltration can happen for things that you may not have thought of before, right? Especially when you're thinking about generative AI and AI agents and kind of how you are trying to build out your target state security strategy for this, right? So pieces of this to help protect against, we went into secure messaging, right? Is how to identify some of the ways to, one, have secure messaging within your environment. What are some of the enterprise messaging architectures? That was a big episode when we went into that kind of thing, right? Is how to use SES, right? How do you use, all of these things? What is a queue when it comes to this, right? So I think that's one part of the puzzle, but the other piece is just plain old, hey, what's a WAF? And how do we use it to protect against common threats and attacks? And those common threats and attacks are evolving over the years, right? Where we started in 2025 is not where we are at the end of 2025 when it comes to common threats, right? Yeah. So there's the OWASP top 10 for vulnerabilities when it comes to WAF. There's ones for LLMs. But if we were to focus on particularly the web attacks, you want to understand what the common attack patterns were kind of yesterday and where they are today, because bot attacks are a little bit different, right? When you think of how bot traffic is, how it can affect application performance, and how exactly within your environment you are potentially vulnerable to these type of threats, right? Where do you have WAFs? So if we were to dive into that, one of the things that we discussed within our previous quest is if you have a centralized approach or a decentralized approach, which one is better for your organization? And that brings me to the Legends of Hidden Temple kind of phrase of the choice is yours and yours alone, right? Yeah. It starts to go down that route because there's things to consider of what application do users have access to. The defense in depth approach that we were mentioning before with identity and all those kind of things. How do you have the automated response pattern set up within your environment? And what is the sophistication level of your rules within your architecture? All these things start to play into it. And when you really take that step back, you start to think about, hey, what level of maturity is my environment today? And where am I going? Where's my North Star that I'm trying to head when it comes to networking security or just everything we were just discussing in our little quest rush, right? Mm-hmm. But if we were to look at all the skills that we develop, Russ, what do you think is some of the foundational? So if this is your first episode, levels 1 through 25, kind of what are some of the things that you need to consider starting out?
Yeah, so I think, we kind of went over some of my DevSecOps experiences this year. I think having those, concepts understood is going to be huge for sure. Seeing how, your CI/CD pipeline just works in general will allow you to, secure it, at a deeper level. So just understanding things like how CI/CD works and how some of the services, especially the big ones, I think everyone, kind of, not everyone, obviously, but I think one of the first things you learn kind of, especially at like the solutions architect associate level, you're going to learn S3, EC2, your big 3 services, and IAM. And so going through and understanding not just what IAM and S3 do, but how they interact. And so, looking at things like, hey, how do we, encrypt things that are, going to S3, or how do we put access control for things that are going into S3? So understanding the basics of services and what you're trying to do and how you would integrate those with, your basic IAM, functions or basic security concepts, looking at web application security concepts. It doesn't have to be super crazy, But just knowing the difference between like a SAST and DAST type of scanning solution, if you don't even know those, then why are you paying for one? You should at least know what you're paying for. So, and then there's things like, your basic compliance, whether you're monitoring that automated or manually, and then logging, especially for someone like me who leans so heavily on logs in IR. So logging is definitely another one that I'm going to put up there. And then, as far as basics go, I think also just documentation. Definitely right up there for me. If you have something, a process or a workflow or something, and it's not written down, do you really have a workflow or a process?
Does it exist?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Is there a Jira ticket for it? No, it doesn't exist. Is there Confluence page? No. Oh, okay. But it's funny because you mentioned a couple things, and logging is one of those items where I think individuals within organizations need to dive a little bit deeper into, because some of the items that we often suggest is, hey, read the incident response guide, right? And the reason why we say that is, hey, it gives you an idea of what you're looking for, and Russ can speak to that portion. It's like when you're doing IR, you don't want to be missing some clues. Right. It's funny enough that we were speaking about a video game before we went live, right? Where the game, you could go down one path and just complete it, or you could go around and solve clues and pick up some more context. That context you can use to help make different results in the game, right? Where somebody can be telling you one thing and you're like, oh, that must be the truth. But a little bit more context changes the whole vantage point and questions that you ask, right? So when you're responding to an event, you want to make sure that you have the proper logs, right? Do you have a mechanism to do something like ad hoc querying of your environment, right? Where you can leverage different services. And that's where that integration piece that Russ was talking about comes into play, where say if you had an S3 bucket, right? You had an IR person that wanted to do a quick query on some past logs for a certain period of time. Well, can they use like a Glue and Athena combo in order to do that ad hoc query, in order to identify, hey, this is what happened really quick, right? This is outside of your normal SIM and all those kind of items, right? Because you want a holistic flow, right? And especially when it comes to having so much data, things that often pop into my mind, VPC flow logs, it generates a lot. So what is the balance between, hey, this is what compliance needs, and this is what my IR person needs in order to respond efficiently, right? And there's also a cost factor and optimization that you can do. But I think that's all part of the skills, and that's how you eventually go from level 1 to 2 to 50, right? It often feels like that, where you're just like, I don't get this. And then it's like you speak to somebody, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I do know a little bit more, right, than I thought I did. And how did I do that? Well, same thing or way that you do everything, right? You listen to the legends of past, and you start to go down that route of saying, hey, what happened in this manner, fashion, and form, right? If there was an incident, okay, what did we learn from it? Well, here on the Safe Room Feature and Security Side Quest, we like to dive in with a little bit of tail, a little bit of, excitement, especially from the dogs within the area. Right? They cater to it. They crave it. So with that, let us dive into our scenario. I will take this ambient music today. All right. So if we think of our legends, let's set up. Yeah, right. You're deep in thought, right? So if we were to have a customer, let's pull from our little assignment saying, hey, we have a rapidly growing mobile company, right? Mobile gaming company called Epic Quest Studios. And with that being said, maybe they need to level up their security posture. You see what we did there?
Probably.
Yeah, right? So after the latest mobile game came out, let's say it's called Crypto Warriors, right? It became an overnight sensation. So if you have this company, right, that became, let's say, very popular overnight, they probably found themselves in a place where they have a treasure trove of items they have to consider, because they are now in the limelight to, let's say, sophisticated attacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they have some critical vulnerabilities where they were focused more on the game development than kind of securing some of these items. So they have some of those gaps present. So if you go from 100K users to 100 million, right, you have infrastructure that goes up. You have multiple AWS services. You become epic in your quest. So what we do is we bring that quest to life with our side quest board, which we kind of put a little representation of what we think is happening within the environment. And what we see is an environment that is very simple in nature. We have our user base, our authenticated users. We have our AWS environment, and we have an S3 bucket. Why? Because data. So if we scroll and scale, and let's say we have multiple more users that maybe they're unhappy with, let's say, hey, they didn't roll a natural 20. They just went out and they didn't succeed in the mobile game. So now they want to say, hey, I can change some of these results, right? They're a new company. Maybe they don't have all their bases covered, right? So if we're taking this into account, Russ, maybe they have some data leakage vulnerabilities that we need to account for. If we were to ask ourselves a question, what would be the scariest boss fight that they would have to think of and deal with in this situation?
The scariest, the scariest I can think of is that there's no monitoring solution, and so they don't even know if there's an issue or not. So that would be my number one thing. There's also other things that I'd look at too. So, looking at the buckets and being like, hey, are these buckets that, we put as public so that way our devs could access this. But now that we blew up overnight, which again, benefit of the cloud is the elasticity, but also for your security teams, it's, a new challenge to face. So looking at those buckets and being like, wow, did we really implement public view on these ACLs, and
it just feels like everything is getting shifted over, right? Because our environment is like, it's growing a little bit more and more, right? Because now we have a bunch of API calls coming into our environment, right? And are those good or bad? Well, maybe we have something like a WAF in place, right? Within that WAF, it's kind of showing us a bigger picture, right, of what is happening within our environment. But of course, that's not all, right? Because as Russ mentioned, as we start to delve in, some of the challenges that we thought is, hey, we have those multiple S3 buckets with incorrect permissions. We have maybe cross-region data replication because now we're scaling, right? We need something of a hub to kind of gather all these insights that we're gathering from all our security services to keep on keeping on by keeping, I was going to say keeping on again, but I was like 3 times as a charm.
Keep on keeping on.
And keep on, right? You see? It sounds like a hit song that someone should take. But when you think about it, you have different security services that you can implement within your environment to help give you a better picture. And this is what we were speaking about when we were going through our recap of, hey, do we have sensitive player data within our S3 buckets? Well, we have something like Macy. Are we getting the proper alerts? Well, we have something like guard duty in place. These are all pieces of the puzzle that we are trying to kind of dig a little bit deeper into. And a little bit off screen, I'll throw a good old CloudWatch in secure mode face up. Because what you're trying to figure out is how you continue on figuring out, hey, if there's an incident, what is our response time? How do we keep going with this, right? And how do you start to think about it? And thank you, Cookie, for the cute little power out there. So I think part of this is what we're trying to get to is, hey, we have all these pieces in play. Now, how do we have some automation and
Mhm.
kind of see yourself in a little bit of a different light? Because if you have automation with Lambda functions to say, hey, if this particular alert triggers, how do we continue on the path of remediation, response? How do we have humans identify? How do we have humans, I don't know, inspect or detect or do different things within the environment? And you kind of see how we're building this out. We're building out a structure, an architecture that has a variety of different things in place, right? That ranges from guard duty to DLP with Macy, with WAF, with different rules. But the one thing and the one item to rule them all is when you think about, hey, what's our identity? Right? This is an important part of the puzzle. And this route may seem confusing. And oftentimes it is, because when you're trying to think of a solution that you just scaled from 100K to 100 million, there's a lot of different items that you have to consider, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to think about your overall target state and the fundamentals that need to be put into place. So as Russ said earlier, you have to think about, hey, we have all these services. What are they doing within our environment? And do we have the proper plan in place to eventually automate? Do we have the security hub enabled to a point that we have some automated compliance checks and integration with our ticketing system, so on and so forth, right? Because what happens is, if they're not, you kind of get a little bit of a different tune of music playing. And it's that reflective, kind of a little bit of a sad tune, right? And why? It's because you had opportunities to optimize your overall environment, right? You had opportunities to have that pause and that applause to say, hey, we did something with our environment, right? But as we continue on, just due to the nature of this side quest, we have to hit the good old pause game button, right? Zach Morris timeout, as we call it on the show. So, what do we want to speak about? Well, we want to jump out and kind of speak from a place of, hey, how do we highlight some of the best practice patterns? Well, you hear about them being implemented, right? And that's kind of what we did, is we had conversation with viewers, and they spoke about listening to episodes and kind of diving into more the DevSecOps approach and mindset of, hey, I have my environment set up like this. I'm tasked with doing certain items. How do I kind of optimize this? And we had these conversations. So what we want to think about is, what are some of the top achievements? That's what we wanted to take a second out. And what you want to do is answer questions from chat. Hey, as long as you're making AI responsive match the documentation, the command line synopsis, I totally agree with you. And the question is, do you have the AI write the documentation, or does the human review the documentation and then give it to the AI? So, chicken and egg. But thank you for that question as always, because we're having this conversation of human in the loop. And I think part of the achievements section that we were speaking about is, hey, do you have security champions within your environment that are implementing pipelines with security baked in throughout, right? It's just like baking in real life. If you are burnt on the outside here, and then you're cold on the inside here, and then this side is kind of breaking off, nobody really wants to, eat your loaf. I was trying to think of what the Christmas one was called, or the holiday one was called, but I forget. Right?
Why?
No, it's the holiday loaf that has the gummy things, and I digress.
I think I lost it.
Yeah. So outside of that tangent is, you want to make sure that it's baked properly throughout, and that's what we went on with. And there was a story of a developer having this conversation with their team of, hey, we need to really have these security scanning tools put into place. Do we have CDK NAG? Do we have CFN guard? Do we have all these items? And it sparked great conversations in ways that they can align their velocity to their security posture, right? Because they want to build, they want to do migrations, but they didn't have all the tools in place. So by listening and having, some words, I would say of wisdom very loosely, but more words of the documentation that says, hey, have these checks, have these toll gates, right? It helps overarchingly to your overall goals, right?
Mhm.
So, Russ, what have you heard as some of the tales from the community that kind of help them to understand and grow within 2025?
Well, especially recently, with the various campaigns, malware campaigns going on, and when you're talking about things like Shai-Hulud and React to Shell and stuff like that, I'm gonna bring those up because they're most recent for me. So going with recency bias here, but things like Inspector, when you're thinking about how do I secure my account, what you bring into your AWS environment also needs to be secure. Talking about code repos and supply chain attacks. I actually was able to work with the Inspector team on some of these cases just to be able to see, how they update their detections and findings and stuff, but also looking at the actual repositories that are listed and why they might trigger something. So we had an example of a inspector finding, where basically the customer was able to find out that they had been hit with a Shai-Hulud, but didn't actually execute anything. They weren't able to get any of their secrets or logins or anything like that. But just knowing that they had this vulnerability, it wasn't exploited and didn't become an incident, but they were able to still remediate a major vulnerability going on. And of course, I've had, the opposite happen where they didn't know until they were already infected, but that's not really the point of my story here. But there are lots of things, based on what you're doing in your environment to think about. And that's why things like, our side quest board and documentation, those designs and flow charts and stuff like that, they start off really simple sometimes, but even the simple ones still have like 15 logos of services and stuff on there. It is complex. It is a beast, especially when you're talking about scaling to, like you said, 100 million people. Those sorts of scale and those challenges that come with that, are definitely the type that'll keep you up at night. So just taking, like you said, a more holistic view on these types of things, and worrying less because you have defense in depth and you have these scanners, your web application scanners, as well as Inspector, and you're not. You're doing the right things, and you made sure and made decisions on what to log and what would be a waste of money and what is important to have, and which services you're going to sample logs from as opposed to getting everything, and basically doing all of these things, right, that seem fundamental, are vital, because you have to be able to do the fundamentals in order to move on to the advanced ones. You can't, like you said, you can't have an AI agent if you don't have the documentation on what the AI agent should be doing. So things like that, they build off of each other. And so, people sometimes want the new fancy thing. And you can have that. You just have to also make sure that the basics are done too, in order for that, new fancy agentic tool to work to the best of its ability. So sometimes you'll pull something in and maybe it's not working for your environment, but that's because you didn't do the steps that you need to in order to make it more effective. So little things like that, little things like something that you talk about a lot, tagging, realizing how important that is when you're in an IR experience. Not the best time, least favorite time for me. Because then I have to be the bearer of bad news and be like, did you happen to tag what this is and whether it's prod or dev or test or any of those things.
Sensitive.
And then yeah, sensitive, critical data, anything. And then I get the, no, we didn't think we had enough to have to do all of that. It's yeah, I think just using exactly. And this is where this, that music reminds me of like a tavern and like an adventure club. And you're like, great, now I got to find an IR adventurer. Who's got it? Who can do the IR? And I'll come over and be like, I'm sorry that you have to use me, but it is the way it is.
Yeah. Now I have this image of you just sitting there waiting in the tavern, like you have come to me, adventurers, for some guidance.
You find your way at my table. Can't be good for you. Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah, it's everything that you're saying is spot on. And I think part of the thing to consider is, one, we have the less than 10-minute drill. So we have that kind of sound going, but also that there's a lot of different avenues to go down. And what we're trying to convey is, hey, it's going to be a complex journey, but it's dangerous to go alone. So take a friend, and one of those friends may be, hey, some documentation, some patterns, some prescriptive guidance, some templates, some AI agents, all these items, right? Because they're all power-ups. And when you get to, hey, what's your favorite security power-up? You'll be able to answer this question. But if you already have one, feel free. 1, 2, 3, or 4 within inside the chat. Russ, your favorite security power-up that plays the, the do. When you hear that, what are you thinking?
That's really tough. I feel like all of these have their own I'm probably gonna go with I'm gonna go with custom WAF rules. And I say that because I think a lot of attacks, especially in the cloud, have at least some form of networking involved. Distributed system relies on networking. And so especially when we're talking about incident response, that's like my go-to containment is, have you added a rule for your WAF to block this traffic that you don't want? Boom. Yeah. So that's my power up. I like blocking things in WAF.
Yeah, and it's a powerful thing to do, and definitely a good route. And to some of the questions, like what Cookie just posed, I think that's why I picked number 3 with automated compliance checks. What I mean by that is automation can be, hey, it automated go or stay, but it also can automate kicking out for a review. Like, hey, we detected these couple of items. We don't know what to do. Here, human in the loop. Come take a look, right? And that's kind of where I like to have things where there are dedicated pieces to, 1, have a great approach, but 2, also have you in a state of, I don't want to say somewhat relaxation. Like, I know there's going to be a check in the balance, but it's more of a, hey, we have this other thing and this other thing and this other thing, right? It usually helps to speak through your workflow, because if your workflow says, hey, we push it to prod and there's nothing in between, then it's like, let's have a deeper conversation. Right? Those are the kind of things that you start to think of, and you start to say, wait, you pushed it to prod? Right? Let's back up a little bit, right? So those are the kind of items that we like to kind of have thoughts about. But the only way to do that is kind of going through some of the documentation, some of the ways that people have done it before. Who has built Aura in the past, right? These are kind of things that you would like to know. What do you mean by building Aura? Is you just have a sense of, like, oh, this person knows about identity. This person knows about security hub. This person knows about this. This person knows about the environment. And one of the things that you'll experience across many environments is there's always one person that seems to know a lot about everything happening in the environment. Well, they didn't just start out that way. They started to go down these little side quests and these little areas to say, hey, what does this do? How does this happen within my environment in such a way that I should be considering it? Well, there's, I would say, a cheat code to getting to where that person is right now. And that cheat code is, via mechanisms like, I would say the well-architected framework as one of the potential pieces. So if we were to take the second and dive into that, hey, this is how you go on a knowledge quest. This is how you become that level 100, novice adventurer saying, hey, I didn't take an arrow to the knee yet, so how do I proceed? Well, AWS well architected, and I dated myself with that reference. So as you go through security foundations, I'll just rush through it because people won't catch on. Identity management. How are you handling these items within your environment? How do you know what to do with AWS WAF or AWS Shield or AWS Shield Network Security Director, AWS File? If all these sound like terms that you want to know about, going through the documentation, that's how you become that novice adventurer, right? That's how you add adventurer to your title, is being curious. And eventually, as you grow your curiosity, you start to become that person who knows a bit about everything, right? And then you kind of level up to being a veteran dungeoneer, right? That's when you get the fancy robes and everything like that, right? So when you become level 200, you start to say, hey, let us go to our environment and deploy Control Tower. What does Control Tower do? It puts together some guardrails that help us to build a foundational environment for ourselves and our customers, right? That's those organizations where we can have SCPs, and those SCPs can block, and stop. You start to go through these kind of things, and there's a page that cheat code. How does it work, right? Usually a lot of documentation has that. And eventually you level up to being somewhat of a legend yourself. And then usually you forge that legend by speaking to people like Russ, or not speaking to people like Russ.
Yeah.
You have something of idea of how you respond to an incident within the environment, right? Because now you know a little bit about everything, how everything works. How do we improve? What are our gaps? How do we get on the cycle of knowledge? This is how you build more, right? This is how you kind of go through it. But I think sometimes you still have to take that, step back and kind of understand, hey, this is where we are. We want to dive a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper till we get to the place of knowing. And the only way to do that is to continue to build up maybe XP, experience, for those first-time joiners. And how do you do that? Well, you kind of look at how everything's laid out. You do it one step at a time, one XP point at a time, one bite at a time, right? And then eventually you level up yourself and your organization and the people around you. Why? Because it is a pattern that we like to say kind of works. And another pattern that works is something that Russ usually speaks about.
Yep. And that would be what I like to call an incident response plan, and how you should have one.
Yeah. And it helps, right? Because how do you become that? L300? Have an IR plan.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
You go through everything. But this is going to be our last episode of the year. So, as always, thank you for everybody who joined us throughout this journey, even if it's one episode,
Absolutely.
1 minute, or 1 second. We appreciate you. But follow us for some upcoming, goodness, I would say. We're going to dive into some areas, right? Maybe some advanced threat detection, some containers, serverless security. Hey, wherever the wind blows,
yep,
we will also go with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Ask us all your questions. Join our landing page. Ask questions on our YouTube videos. We check those things. We'll get back to you. We'll put it in a new episode. Yeah. Big things coming for 2026.
Yes. So the applause goes to you. Right? Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, everyone.
All right.
See you next year.